Okay, starting on page 32 in the first section of Excel in Excel B, you're going to want to look at how to move and copy cell entries. Sometimes this is beneficial if you want to do the same type of processes, possibly change a calculation, change something a little bit. In this case, the spreadsheet that we've been working on, they want to not only calculate the 20% increase in sales, but they also want to project what a 30% increase in sales would be. Same as in Word, copy, cut, paste. You're using the temporary clipboard that will allow you to store data as you grab it in a cell and move it. Same as in copy, cut, paste. And as in Word, you can use Control C, Control V for copy and paste. You can use Control X for cut and Control Z for undo. So the same type of keystrokes, the shortcuts that you used in Word, will also work in Excel. Like I said before, the clipboard temporarily stores what you copied and what you've cut to put it in the paste area. So if we're looking at this spreadsheet, you'll see if you look at page 33 that they're trying to get the 30% projection, and it allows you to go ahead and just copy the formula from the 20% rise, put it down in the 30% rise where you want to put it, and then actually all I have to do is change the 1.2 to 1.3 and it'll do the calculation. So when we're looking at this, let's expand this window again. Copy, cut, paste. You've got the copy, paste button, copy button are all at the top of the Excel spreadsheet, and the clipboard's just like the clipboard in Word, where you'd see this on your right hand side or the left hand side of the frame. But in this case, I need to get back out of this. It's getting a little too big for me. Okay, when you're looking at copy, cut, paste, it looks a lot like the changes you would make in Word. It's the same type of thing with the clipboard over on the left hand side. So when you want to use a relative cell reference, relative cell references refer to when you want to preserve the relationship of the formula location. In other words, if you want to do a calculation with a number that is in B2 and you always want to use that number that is in B2, the cell reference changes. Okay, before I go into this any further, we're going to describe the differences between relative cell reference and absolute cell reference. A relative cell reference can refer to either a column-specific letter that you want the cell to be a specific location, or a specific row location, such as in row 16, row 10, row 12. Absolute reference refers to when you want a specific exact cell to be used. You have an absolute reference that is in B12, only B12, and that's the only cell that you want to use for your calculations. So when the formula is copied in a relative cell reference, the cell reference changes to preserve the relationship of the formula to the reference of the cells. In other words, if the cell says, as the book tells you, when you move this over here to this new spot, go up 4 and over to the 4 to the left to grab the number from that spot, and that would be the relative reference. That is Excel default. That is the way things move, and it actually allows you to copy and paste formulas from each column to the next columns and each row to the next row, and Excel actually makes those transitions for you so things will actually work the way you want them to. So if we look at this, formula containing relative cell references, we'll move this up again so you can see it well. This is a formula containing a relative cell reference, and you can see there are nothing different from what we've done. And when you move it to the next column or the next row, depending upon which way you're going, you'll see that the formula changes to match where you're at. A formula references B5 to B12. When it's moved to column C, will reference C5 to C12, and so on and so on. When you want to move to an absolute reference, an absolute cell reference refers to a specific guaranteed one spot location that you want that software to go to. So you want to preserve the exact cell location in the formula. The reference doesn't change even if the formula is copied to a new location, and you do that by placing a dollar sign before the letter and before the row, the column letter, and before the row number of the cell's address. And you can do this either with both the letter and the cell number, or you can do one or the other if you want to refer to just strictly you want everything to stay in column B, or you want everything to stay in the same row, row 16, or vice versa. However you want to make sure that the software absolutely stays in that same location. So when we're looking at absolute and relative cell references, they've got a really nice page on page 39 where they show you what happens if you have an absolute reference that'll grab incorrect values. And if you have an absolute reference that references division by zero or other types of activities that will give a value that does not appropriately work in Excel, Excel will send you an error message. So if you're using an absolute reference, that may cause a problem with your formula. So once again, we're talking about absolute and relative reference. You can have a mixed cell reference, which I was just telling you about. You can have one that may have the same row but a different cell number, or the same cell number but a different row or a different column. In order to make variations into your absolute cell references, you can create those changes by using the F4 key, which will actually toggle you through all the possible changes that could be made to your absolute cell reference to make sure it works the way you want it to. When you're copying formulas within your spreadsheet, you need to keep in mind whether or not your formula has a relative or an absolute cell reference in the cell, because that can mess up your resulting answers that you may get. That's detailed on pages 38 and 39 in the textbook. It shows you what can happen when you use an absolute reference or a relative cell reference and you're trying to do a continual calculation. In this case, they're looking for what if we only have a 1.1% sales increase, what would the results be? And that shows you what could happen in that location. So when you're copying formulas with relative cell references, you're going to reuse the formulas you created. Like I told you before, you can copy and paste into the subsequent cells, and it'll actually change the column reference and leave the number references in place if that's what you want it to do. So when you're copying formulas, it shows you here in the textbook how this can work. One other thing that's really nice to know is to know about the autofill function. Autofill can be used to fill in a series, either sequential text with or values, such as months of the year, days of the week, numbering things. You can start off with 1 and number a series of rows, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So basically, you can use autofill to go in two different directions. One is you can start with the first cell and put 1, and in the second cell you could put equals A1 plus 1, and then copy that and drag it down to the rest of the cells, and that'll create your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or you can use the drag and fill handle to extend the existing sequence in your numbers or your letters. When you're copying formulas with absolute cell references, make sure you copy it once and take a look at the results to make sure that you may not want to change that cell reference before you do the copying. This shows you the pages in the textbook we were referring to earlier on page 38 and 39. So if we're looking for rounding a value with a function, cells that contain financial data are often easier to read if they contain fewer decimals. You may want the decimals to round up from 4 digits up to 3, 3 to 2. You may actually even in some cases want to set the number in the cells to be financial data with 2 decimal places and maybe even a $ sign in the front of it. You can also tell using an existing formula to round the value with a function, using a function from the function menu. Let me zoom in here. And you can tell, looking at this formula, it's telling it to round B12 plus B12 times the 0.02 or the 0.02 increase. It tells it to round that to 2 digits. So you can see that it tells it to round it. And if you look at page 41, you can see the results of the rounding, how it will round it up or down depending upon the value of that, the last digits. So this is the end of Excel B. We'll move on to Excel C next.